Hello and welcome to this Euractiv event. My name is Natasha Foote. I'm an agri-food and health reporter with Euractiv, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's event on reducing the use of antibiotics in the livestock sector. So the overuse and misuse of antibiotics in both animals and humans is contributing to the rising threat of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR as it's known. So already this is estimated to lead to around 33,000 human deaths in the EU every year, as well as 700,000 deaths per year globally, and it's also estimated to cost the EU 1.5 billion euros each year. So a very serious problem, and one that is just set to get worse, so much so that it has been listed by the World Health Organization as among the top 10 biggest global threats. Yet despite the risk that it poses to our global food supply and also to human health, this looming global crisis is still not really getting the attention that it deserves. That being said, the issue is gaining some ground at the policy level. So the EU's flagship food policy, the Farm to Fork strategy, sets an ambitious target to reduce the sales of antimicrobials for farmed animals by 50% by 2030. And we also have new regulations on veterinary medicinal products that will come into play as of 2022, which aim to provide a wide range of concrete measures to tackle AMR. So although the livestock sector has already made significant progress in the reduction of the use of antibiotics in recent years, the question is, how can we build upon this progress? What lessons can be learned from the front runners in the field? And also, how can we ensure that these lessons are expanded beyond EU borders, because this really is a global issue? And that is exactly what we're going to explore today. But before we get stuck into today's conference, let me first turn to my colleague, Teresa, who will just run through a few housekeeping rules. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natasha. Good afternoon and welcome. When writing questions in the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of the chat box on the right side of your screen, please identify yourself, keep your questions short and concise, and indicate to which panelist you are addressing the question. We also encourage tweeting, so join the online discussion on Twitter using the hashtag EADebates. You can see here, hashtag EADebates. Enjoy the discussion.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today. So with us today, we have Andrea Gavinelli, who's Head of Unit of Animal Welfare and Antimicrobial Resistance at the European Commission's DG Sante. We have Green MEP Sarah Wiener, who is the Chair of the European Parliament's MEP Interest Group on AMR, as well as being a professional chef and an organic farmer herself. We also have Erin Reisman, who is a Senior Animal Health and Production Officer at the UN's food branch, the FAO. Roxanne Feller, who is the Secretary General of Animal Health Europe. And lastly, but not least, Lara San Francesco, who's the Director of the Italian Association Una Italia, and also a member of AVEC, the voice of the European poultry sector, who is also the sponsor of today's event. So a warm welcome to all of you. As you can see, we have a nice wide range of panelists bringing a wealth of expertise to what I'm sure will be a very, very rich discussion. So now I will just turn to each of our panelists in turn for a short opening remark before we get stuck into the debate. So Andrea, perhaps I can come to you first for your opening remark. The floor is yours.
Yes, first of all, Natasha, thank you very much for this opportunity. It is really the moment about talking about an issue that is at the heart of the Farm to Fork strategy, and really an important element to prepare and to develop further after the lessons learned from the COVID. In fact, you know, in the Farm to Fork, you mentioned this reduction of sales of antimicrobial by 2030 or 50% is one of the ambitious targets we have on the food side of antimicrobial resistance. But we have to see this in the One Health dimension, and now we have to progress really hand in hand with the health side, human health side. In fact, this is the real interdependence of this of the animal and the human side. That is probably what configured that I am now responsible of a unit called Animal Welfare and Antimicrobial Resistance. Really, because as we said there is a strict relation between how we farm and grow our animals and produce our food, and in fact the control over the use of medicaments. We have already great success stories in Europe, as you know very well, and I'm sure people in this panel will be able to explain better than me how the efforts are going in that direction. But it's clear that we are not alone. We are going globally to face this challenge, and that's why also we are working, thanks to the legal basis we have, to encourage the ban and the use of antimicrobial as for the country that trade with us, using them as growth promoter or to increase the production or yield, or also the ban of the use of these products that are in fact also used for the care of human, so not to really create less capacity for the human to react to it. So in conclusion, we have an important task ahead of us. We have to look as much as we can through an harmonized approach, and the EU is well placed because we have already capacity to, since years, to connect with member states. We have the capacity to work in a tripartite issue with FAO, with WHO, and the multilateral organizations like the OIE also that are in this area. As a consequence, I think this is the good way to, we have the real base to continue. That's like, this is my introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea, touching upon some issues that we're going to definitely dig into deeper in the discussion. So thank you for that. I'll now pass the floor to Sarah for your opening remark. Is Sarah online? Okay, no, I think we've just lost Sarah for a moment. Some technical issues, no problem. We will go for we'll go to Erin then for your opening remark. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for this opportunity. FAO is committed to the global fight against emergence and spread of AMR, which is following the action plan, the global action plan published by WHO in 2015. This underlines the importance of the One Health approach whenever we try to tackle the threat of AMR. FAO works closely with WHO and the OIE, the World Animal Health Organization, as a tripartite initiative, as well with other partners such as Codex Alimentarius Commission, the United Nations Environmental Program, and different institutions in academia and research institutions. FAO action plan on AMR focus on main 4 areas, which I will try to be brief and describe them. The first one is raising awareness. FAO believes that raising awareness among different stakeholders, from farmers to policymakers in the government, is extremely important in order to tackle the threat of AMR, which can be done, of course, using all the technology that we have today, particularly social media. The second is the developing capacity for surveillance and monitoring of AMR and also antimicrobial use in different agriculture systems, particularly in livestock. The capacity of taking samples like for animal health and analyze them in the laboratory, detect in time the antibiotic resistance is extremely important. The third one is strengthening the governance related to AMR and antimicrobial use in food and agriculture in general. In order to tackle this threat, of course, you have to have the right policies and the right laws, but also to enforce them in an effective way. Finally, promoting good practices in food and agriculture system as well, the prudent use of antibiotics are crucial. Personally, I'm a big believer in promoting these good practices, because I believe that in the livestock sector, if you promote good husbandry practices that aim at improving animal health, eventually you don't need to use as much as antibiotics as if you just neglect the status of your animal. That's basically the main four pillars that we are focusing, and I would be happy to continue the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin, for that overview. We still haven't quite got Sarah on the line, so Roxanne, I will come to you next for your opening statement. The floor is yours.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. You see that I'm Roxanne Feller, but I'm here speaking on behalf of Animal Health Europe. We represent the animal health industry, manufacturing the medicines and the vaccines and other tools for the animal health here in Europe and over the world, but I represent Europe. Maybe one little parenthesis, maybe this is a good sign. Unfortunately, we can't see and hear Sarah for now, to ensure that we have broadband all over Europe, especially in agricultural areas. Sorry, that's just placing a little message here. So on behalf of Animal Health Europe, we have three main messages at this stage I'd like to share with you. The first one could have been the one that Andrea just said, and I'm glad to see Andrea, it's been a while. We are, of course, looking at reducing antibiotics, but we talk about reducing the need, not only the use, but the need for antibiotics in the livestock sector. Because at the end of the day, it's not about reduction as such. It's about making sure that those antibiotics that we need, and when I say we, I would say farmers, but especially in the human sector, that are still working. Because if you have a disease caused by a bacteria, and then you use an antibacterial, an antibiotic, and it doesn't work, then you're in trouble. So I think we're all committed under the One Health approach to make sure that we need to reduce the need for antibiotics so that we keep them working. The second message I would like to share with you, and that could have been the one that I could have totally said what Erin had said. My message is, let's use our antibiotics responsibly. And what does that mean? Of course, it means ensuring good husbandry, good housing, we call that biosecurity, ensure also good hygiene practices, make sure that you're regularly monitoring your animals on your farm. Appropriate nutrition is very important too, and also a responsible use of vaccines, because to prevent is also a good way to avoid curing. We sometimes say prevention is better than cure. Then the third message I'd like to convey here is that animal health is a precondition to animal welfare. When you think of yourself, if your animal is not healthy, that means if it's sick, clearly you don't feel well. You need to make sure that all animals are kept healthy. And as Animal Health Europe, we have absolutely no preconception of what type of farming system is the one that is the best for that. There's some good in all types of farming methods. And for us, all animals are equal and deserve being treated. So in a nutshell for now, Natasha, I would say that we advocate for antibiotics that should only ever be used as little as possible, but as much as necessary. And I'll be more than happy to answer more questions later on in the debate. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roxanne, raising some really interesting points there. And we finally have Sarah back with us. Roxanne raised the issue. We need good broadband across the EU, clearly. Sarah, I'll come to you now for your opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. And sorry that I have technical problems, so I'm not sure what you have seen till now. I think it's quite clear that we need to focus much more on prevention. At the moment, we only try to fix problems, but that's just not good enough, especially in the context of AMR and the global health threat it represents. An important element for prevention is, of course, animal husbandry practices and the impact they have on animal health. I think it is quite clear that we must scrap industrial animal farming models and move to systems that are land-based and raise much fewer. But much but much healthier animals in conditions that are appropriate for the natural requirement of each species. But focusing on husbandry practices alone is not enough. An important aspect of animal welfare, often neglected, which we urgently need to address, is breeding. In fact, I think breeding is crucial because animals are bred only for performance without regard of the physiological limits of their bodies. Thus, animals face dual sources of stress. One caused by the unnatural environment they live in every day, which does not allow them to live out their natural behaviors and where they are cramped into insufficient space with sometimes thousands and thousands other animals. And there is the pressure to breed for ever more performance, such as faster growth and weight gain, more egg or milk production or higher reproduction rates or more breast by the turkeys. Essentially, modern breeding targets have led to what it's termed as Qualzucht in German, roughly meaning torture breeding, with disastrous results for animal health. So when we speak about reducing the use of antibiotics, we cannot only set reduction targets, as this will not necessarily mean that we tackle the underlying issues. Rather, we must start at the beginning of the chain, and for that we cannot ignore breeding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Raising a very interesting issue there of breeding, and we'll definitely come back to that to explore a little bit more later on. And yet, lastly, and then definitely not least, Lara, let me come to you for your opening statement.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you to all the panelists. I'm really honored to stay here today with you representing AVEC, the European Poultry Sector Association. I am the director of Unitalia. Unitalia is the Italian association representing more than 90% of the Italian poultry production. And I have been called to illustrate the Italian experience in reduction of use of antibiotics. We have to step back in 2013 when the debate in Italy on AMR, but let's say in EU, became stronger and created more awareness on the public health risk connected to the resistance of pathogens to some antibiotics. So the sector that I represent started with a deep reflection, having clear that we were using in Italy a large quantity of antibiotics, both in human than in livestock. And so we decided to be proactive and fast and to be part of the solution of this issue. So we decided to gather together all the stakeholders, poultry farmer, processors, public health authority, which means Ministry of Health, animal health and welfare specialists. And we built a plan that was voluntary, but we covered more than 85% of the Italian poultry production, thanks to the high level of integration vertically of the poultry chain in Italy, and science-based with a One Health approach. The roadmap of the plan was stretched over a period of 4 years and targeted both chickens and turkeys. We took as starting point the antimicrobial use in 2011, and we set as an initial target a reduction of 50% within 2015 to arrive to a 40% in 2018. What we see, the results that we have seen were surprising and amazing because we reached the target of 2018 already 2 years before. That's why in 2017 we plan a new reduction plan, focusing our attention more on qualitative aspect. The aim was not merely the reduction of the amount of antibiotic used in our sector, but we wanted to have an impact on the reduction of those antibiotics identified as critically important for human health. More attention has been paid on this kind of antibiotics, aiming to globally reduce it. In particular, we fully banned, starting from 2017, the use of colistin in broilers. And we only allow injectable use for turkeys. while third and fourth generation cephalosporin was banned already in 2009. So the final goal, the final result in 2019, compared to our starting point, has been approximately a reduction of 87% in broilers and 75% in turkeys, with an average of 82%. That's all. If you want to, I can explain how we achieve these results in the coming section.
We'll definitely dig into that, definitely. Thank you very much, okay, for your opening remarks there. So now let's get stuck into the debate today. And for the first question, I'm going to turn to you, Roxanne. I mean, I think we've had a pretty good introduction to the topic here, but perhaps you could just set the scene a little bit for us for our discussion today. Could you give us a kind of overall picture of the use of antimicrobials in the EU at the moment, the state of play, how the sector compares to the rest of the world, and, you know, are we heading in a generally positive direction in your opinion?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. What I will be telling you is not me saying it. It's the facts from a study that is led by the European Commission, the European Medicines Agency, and the EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, if I'm not mistaken. And the idea is that they have monitored the use of antibiotics, the sales of antibiotics, for at least 11 years now. And the reduction has been of more than 34% overall in Europe, overall for all the type of productions, overall for all types of animals used in production. So first of all, that's a pretty good number, and so we have to acknowledge that. Of course, then we might need in the longer run to differentiate between the countries and between the types of productions, particularly the types of animals, because maybe some efforts can still be made, you know, in one part of in some countries and more in some types of in some animals. But going down, I mean, I wouldn't want that we go down forever, because imagining a world without antibiotics would not be the way forward. At least that's not the way we see it. But I think we're in the right direction. We're just a little bit questioning, and I'm glad we have somebody here that shows us why the Farm to Fork has set the 50% production target. Where does it come from? That's a little bit my question. But clearly my message here is we've been doing great since 2011. It's the European Medicines Agency report that says it, and we're ready to, of course, continue the challenge that's been set, and we will do everything to combat antimicrobial resistance in particular.
So definitely an interesting kind of generally positive. There's been some progress made and more to make. Yeah. Sarah, let me turn to you now. I mean, we've heard, I think everyone mentioned in their introductory remarks, this One Health approach. Perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on what we mean by a One Health approach and why it's so important when it comes to this issue.
Yes, to say it very simple, because we are not alone. We are connected with everything and everybody in our environment. So our health means also the health from the soil and the health from the animals, and then the health from ourselves. So it's really important to work to let the boundaries with closed circle behind, and to work from hand to hand together, and thinking the whole chains of problems to tackle them. Otherwise, we will not have a chance if we just pick few things out and we let the other go, to say it like this.
Mm-hmm. This kind of more holistic approach, taking into account how everything is connected. Mm-hmm. And
yes, I mean,
okay.
We have... Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
So we see that it's not just the animal welfare problem, the antibiotics and the medicine. We know that AMR is also linked by farming, and for some human infections such as Campylobacter or Salmonella, they farm antibiotics use in the main cause of resistance in human infections. And farm antibiotics use has significantly contributed to the rise of new and almost untreatable type of E. coli, which is causing large numbers of deaths in the UK and elsewhere. So we cannot say we just tackle one problem. Also, the reserve antibiotics is a huge problem that we don't have any one that is just left for our humans. And as I mentioned, that the breeding system and the animal agriculture system is very, very bad for our environment, but also for our health, and then in the end also for the health for the animals.
Yeah, definitely recognizing this interconnection of human and animal health and the relationship between the two. So we've heard kind of quite generally, about what's happening at the EU level, about this one health approach. Lara, perhaps we can zoom in a little bit now and talk about your specific example from Italy, because something I hear quite a lot, and I've heard many times actually, is that with kind of warmer southern countries, they have to rely more on antibiotics to kind of combat higher levels of bacteria and more disease. But it's really interesting what you were saying, this average of 82% reduction in Italy's poultry sector. It's a very interesting example of a southern country that's managed to kind of slash its antibiotic use. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you achieved this and, kind of looking to the future, how you can continue to build on this?
Yes, for sure. I think that the first point to be successful has been to promote a cultural change of farming management and to show that change was possible and even convenient. That's why we focused the attention on involving all farmers and train it. I want to point out that our plan, the reduction in our plan, has been considered just as final result of a process, of a set of measures in place in order to have no need to treat the animals. The pillars of our plan was improve the level of biosecurity in the farm, improve the animal welfare practices, and most important, to improve the awareness of farmers and veterinary practitioners on the rational use of antimicrobials. They wanted to be part of the change, but they didn't want to be left alone. And here comes the importance of a good communication strategy. Farmers have to be reassured that this innovation would have not bad impact on their revenues, and also to recognize the effort made. For example, our association a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, introduced the Poultry Farmer of the Year award. The farmers who has distinguished in terms of innovation, animal welfare, less use of antibiotics, improving biosecurity or environmental impact, receive a reward by Unitalia to reinvest in the facilities. And this kind of initiative, which means to spread best practices, to create a standard even more high, with a good competition with farmers, has been also lauded by the European Commission, by FVO in a recent audit in Italy on the issue of antimicrobial resistance, as one of the good practices to put in place to create this change, cultural change. And what we see that after this strong work, we made really a strong and fast job on this issue. And the results we are looking now in terms of reduction of resistance. because as far as we know, the reduction in use of antimicrobial is in terms of timing not directly proportional with the reduction of resistance. But if you look at the recent report by the European Food Safety Authority on this issue, we have clearly seen that there is a declining trend in resistance, and furthermore, an increasing trend in number of fully susceptible isolates on antimicrobial. So we are really proud of this job. We are perfectly aware that this is the right way to move.
And as well as, you know, you've highlighted the case of Italy here, as well as there being kind of differences between EU countries, there's also quite marked difference in progress between different subsections of the livestock sector, you know, between different species. Lara, perhaps you could elaborate a little bit more on this. Why is there this difference between different species, and what does it mean for the way that we need to kind of target our efforts on antimicrobial resistance?
I think there could be different situation in the different member states and in the different sector. For example, in Italy, we have been successful and also fast because the sector is structured with a high level of integration, which means that all the steps of the chain are strictly interconnected, have a lot of change, support, and change of best practice technologies. There are other sectors that has not the same level of integration, and this creates more difficult to be successful in training, in spreading best practices. But for example, in Italy, we are trying to export the good example of the poultry sector also in other sectors, such as the pig one, because we represent as Unitalia also a small part of the pig sector, the one who is integrated in a vertical chain. So I think that what the panelists said before, it is really important to focus on training and best practice, to work together in the same direction to be successful.
And Andrea, let me turn to you now. So we've heard that there's kind of these differences in between different countries, different sectors. I think Roxanne raised in her opening remark about this 50% target set in the farm to fork strategy and why it was set at the level it was. And I suppose I'm kind of wondering as well, you know, it sets this kind of blanket target, but how important is it to make this kind of maybe more targeted? How can we account for this variation and these different kind of starting points within different sectors?
Yes, Natasha, thank you. Definitely, the target, as you know, has been a relevant decision, because when you have to fix objective and you are working on a strategy that is globally viewed, clear cut, you are also in the need to set up a benchmark, and the trend comes from, of course, the analysis of the different trends that were showing, for example, by EFSAC and so on. And it is, in fact, we can say a sort of an important also symbolic element. Is going hand in hand with this demand of change. I pick up from all the speakers here, including Sarah, spoke about the idea of guiding from Europe a sort of change in looking for what we consume in terms of meat, for example. That is the subject of this discussion. The fact that we embed good farming practices, but even a new way to approach the breeds of animals we bring on in terms of their productivity, and of course we embrace in this not only what I represent, DG Sante, but DG Trade, DG Agri, all the policies that are connected with in fact the farming system. The target, so the 50%, as we said, is important. In my opinion, to show the way, even more that what is a concrete measures like the one we have in the regulation that we have in VMP, like the ban on the use, as I said, as growth promoter, or the prevention to reduce them for preventive using medicated feed, or other similar rules. I mean, what I try to say, that because I come also from animal welfare side, the rules are relevant, they set the ambition, but most important are the means and how the professionality, the knowledge, the system around the food is, and I include this, the consumer, are aware that is a common target, a common goal to achieve. For me, that's why I believe that also talking about One Health is extremely important, because the means of coordinating health for animals in Europe are historically standing there since a long time, and the means for human health we see are less binding and need to be and will be reinforced stronger and stronger, having learned from this pandemic. So we see how we have a great opportunity to talk about and the opportunity to bring in this One Health all these two spheres together at the same pace. And that for fighting AMR is a clear-cut dimension. I conclude also saying that, in my opinion, we have also signs from the citizens that are really signs that are important to read, not only when we have this agreement that come on this 50%. For example, when we talk about the end of the cage age initiative, where we have 1,500,000 citizens on that. And when you are there, you reflect and you understand probably that behind a symbol of a cage, like the 50% of antibiotics reduction, there is probably a lecture of what you wish for the future. And this is the reality of Brussels, to work together hand in hand. We represent industry here, farmer, we represent a multilateral organization, and a chef that is infected at the end. But I think this is the real thing, and that's the advantage of this.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. It's kind of like a symbolic target, but I mean, in terms of you know, as I was talking about the different starting points of the different areas, the different sectors, you know, how can the strategy account for that, Andrea?
Sorry, at the moment I lost a little the message. Could you repeat? Would
you like to repeat? Yeah, of course. I was just bringing it back again to this point of different starting points in different sectors, and how we can, you know, there's just one blanket kind of 50% target, which I think you said was kind of a symbolic statement, and this target very ambitious. But I'm wondering, you know, how can we take into account the fact that some sectors are starting from different points?
Well, it comes anyway from the consultation of member state. This was agreed, as you know, and is in the strategy as an element that came by a long consultation of different parties. So we have to say the different level. Of course, we are going to assess this, and even we start now an important project that will allow to benchmark the different national plan for AMR, and this is one of the priority we have for the future months. Director F is in fact leading on that. So for me, the fact that it has been agreed and globally we can say shared, it's already a validation that there is this ambition. It was carefully considered. We have recommendations that come from the different that were done to the different member states, and we have a response to it. So it is factually based on that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Eran, let me turn to you now for maybe a slightly provocative question. I think, you know, Roxanne said in her introductory remarks that, you know, we wouldn't want a world where, you know, where there's no antibiotics, that it's not the way forward. And I wanted to draw on your experience here as a vet and kind of offer your perspective on, you know, some people would say, well, we should simply restrict antibiotic use just to humans. But is it that simple? You know, why are antibiotics so important for use in animal agriculture? Why do they need to be kind of part of this toolbox for animal health?
Well, thank you for the provocative question.
You're welcome.
I can't imagine the world without antibiotics, as we cannot imagine. I mean, we cannot imagine human medicine without antibiotics. Similarly, animal health cannot be maintained without antibiotics. But definitely, we can reduce the need for it, and through, as explained, the good practices, etc. I definitely think that the world should move like Europe toward prohibiting the use of antibiotics as a growth promoters or as a general prevention measure for diseases. But unfortunately, we live in a world full of bugs, and animals get sick. And when animals get sick, we need to help them. So it's an issue of also animal welfare beyond the protecting your production assets as a farmer. Let's take a simple calf, a few days old calf. If it's born into a dirty environment and it doesn't get his first colostrum in time, most likely he will get sick from different gastrointestinal bacteria. So you want to save this calf that probably can be also a very good future cow, milking cow. You need to, among other things, you need to also provide some antibiotics. Or the same thing about poultry. If you see that there is an outbreak of salmonella that you could not avoid by good husbandry practices in time, you need to use them. But once again, I mean, it's not about using the antibiotics. There's no doubt we need to do that. The challenge is really to prevent, as mentioned here, prevention is done by adopting good practices, hygiene, biosecurity, not too many crowded animals in certain surface, etc. But the use of antibiotics will be always, hopefully, we will be able to use them for long term, simply because we cannot get rid of diseases. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Roxanne, you were the one to raise that in your introductory remarks. Do you have anything to add to that statement?
Well, yes. Maybe one item that hasn't been brought in to feed into the discussion of reducing the need is maybe also include the responsible use of vaccines. Because when it can be done, of course, use vaccines in the sense that if we could, we would have vaccines for every type of disease, but it's not the reality. And so, like Erin just said, we need to keep on having that in the toolbox for the animals. So yes, prevention is better than cure, but let's not forget that you need to cure whatever you do. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe one more item about antimicrobial resistance. In fact, not so many animals are resistant to antibiotics. It's usually the humans. So, I mean, our objective here as the animal health sector is, of course, to work and combat and help in the fight against antibiotic resistance in humans. And we've been doing that for over 15 years in our industry with a platform called EPRUMA, European Platform for Responsible Use of Medicines in Animals. And we started off by working on responsible use of antibiotics. So it's been something on our minds for more than 15 years, and we'll continue to fight against antibiotic resistance in humans as much as we can.
And Sarah, I can see you wanted to come in on this point. I thought this question might spark some debate. What's your response to these statements you've heard and to this question?
Yes, I want to say healing one animal, very good. but routine antibiotics use is enabling the continuation of intensive farming systems and fueling the antibiotic resistance crisis in people. So these life-saving medicines are abused to perpetuate and prop up a broken farming system, because this way the lifetime of the sick agriculture system is prolonged more and more. Animals do not need routine antibiotics to stay healthy. Organic and higher welfare systems use antibiotics sparingly and only when animal needs it. And livestock should and can be kept healthy through good husbandry and welfare rather than through bought-in immunity. For example, a study recently published by the Alliance to Save Our Antibiotics has shown that organic livestock farmers certified by the Soil Association in the UK use 4 times less antibiotics than the national average across all animal species, which clearly shows that we can do much better. So prevention is very important, but also we have to speak about our agriculture system and what we can really do to reduce antibiotics and prevent not how do you say, to give a door for more AMR.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned this report, which actually I'm going to come to a little bit later to hear your views on. So we've sparked a bit of a debate here. There's a few people that would like to come in on this and respond to your comments about routine antibiotic use. Eran, did you want to come in on this one?
Yes, please. Well, first, I totally agree with Sarah, but would like to bring another perspective. In regard to vaccine, Roxanne, it's important to remember that many of the vaccines for animals are for viral diseases. So the infection with bacteria that antibiotics are supposed to work on are generally secondary infections. But we have some good vaccines for bacterial diseases, and again, we need to, of course, to use them. I'm totally in that, supporting that. In regard to if there is the problem is that in many countries outside the EU, at least, we don't know if there is a antimicrobial resistance among animals. Because there's no surveillance, nothing. I think in Europe itself, it's still there's a lot to do and to improve this kind of surveillance. But in many other countries, some of them are trying to access the EU. There's no such surveillance, so this knowledge is a total black hole, if you want to say. The problem with antibiotic use in many countries, in poor countries and poor population, is that there's no veterinarian nearby to get his advice. So people have easy access to antibiotics, and they do that in order to save their assets, their livelihoods. So in the reality of EU, it's very easy to say, look, almost every farmer has good access to a veterinarian, but this still is not the reality of many other countries surrounding the EU, and we need to keep that in mind.
Definitely very important to keep this kind of outward perspective. And you mentioned vaccines here, I think, and Roxanne, you mentioned them as well. I mean, we talk about vaccines all the time at the moment. I think we hear about it all the time in the context of COVID-19. But you touched upon here, I mean, how important are the role of vaccines in the reduction of antibiotics in animal health? Are they developed enough? What's your response, Roxanne, to Aaron's point there about can they help fight AMR?
You're asking me?
Oh, Roxanne. Yeah, sorry, Roxanne. That was
sorry.
you.
I've been sorry. Yes. First, no I'd problem. Like to tell Sarah that we're totally behind you when you're saying we don't want routine use of antibiotics in animals. I mean, we've been saying that when the topic was high on the agenda during the VMP review, veterinary medicinal product review of our regulation. So totally in agreement with you. And also, like Andrea said, antibiotics use as growth promoters in Europe has been banned. And we totally support that. So that's really, really, really not what is at stake here. What is at stake is the fact that there are not vaccines for everything. Erin said it. I didn't say it. And I know, of course, usually vaccines are for viruses. I think I just got my vaccine shot before yesterday for the COVID virus everybody knows about. So, you know, that is more doable. But if we were able, if we, the medicinal industry, were able to do vaccines and prevent every disease, believe me, they would do it. But it's not just by wishing that you can get it. Sometimes it's just technically very difficult. Maybe sometimes the molecules or they're very complex. And for some diseases, they've been working years trying to find a vaccine. So yes, I do believe that if we can, we would prevent even more. But for now, unfortunately, inverted commas, hygiene practices, good nutrition, hygiene rules are the ones that we need to, you know, to push. And maybe one last reaction also to Sarah. I get your concerns about breeding. You know, that it's only for more productivist reasons. But breeding has also some very good things to it, because I having been in that indirectly for a few years, breeding can also have animals that are less prone to diseases. So I think breeding in general can be good, also for helping in reduction for the need for antibiotics. Thank you for this.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, perhaps you'd like to respond to that. You were talking about the need to consider breeding and, you know, how important good breeding practices are to ensure healthy animals and to decrease the likelihood of using antibiotics. Is there, in your opinion, enough focus on this aspect in the discussion on ASMR, in your opinion?
Thank you. I have to say, sadly, no, I don't agree, because all the resistances begin also with the intensity of the breeding, which makes the intensity of feeding and keeping worthwhile. Breeding inevitably reduces the self-regulatory mechanisms in the animals, forces performances that the animals would not otherwise provide, and make it possible for the animals to perform even in spite of illness. The keeping of animals exacerbate disease pressure. Stable act as fast breeding grounds for bacteria. Disinfections and medicines, not only antibiotics, have an antimicrobial effect and aggravate the development of resistances in all microorganisms, just like outside. So we wouldn't sit here if we wouldn't know. We all know that really the AMR is the hugest threat that we will focus in the next years. And of course, we know that a lot of this AMR comes from the husbandry. And really, we have also to tackle it, and just not from the queue, from the beginning, from not, we just tackle the problems that plop out, but we have really to focus on the roots and to tackle them. And then we are on this huge issue with breedings, what is really a threat and has the impact that we have also, as I mentioned, this word Qualzucht, yes. A lot of things I can tell. And also it's not just about health. When we say One Health approach, yes, the holistic way, then we have also to take about nutrition, about the quality of food, about agriculture systems, also about poor and rich, and the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis and the water crisis. So we have just a small focus with our AMR, but to say the truth, it impacts the whole chain, and we have to change bravely this change if we want to have a future and our children a future. I know it's not easy, but we have to be brave and to focus the new things and the better thing.
Mm-hmm. And Roxanne, what's your response to that? I mean, about this this issue of breeding, and then I think I will come to Lara to hear also maybe your experiences with breeding, perhaps from the Italian perspective.
Well, first I'll react on, like Sarah, I have children and I hope one day to have grandchildren. So this, of course, is also my objective, to make sure that we give them a nice world. But I'm not saying it, it's studies saying it. And let's bring back, things into perspective. My understanding is that 75% of total of the burden of the infections associated with antibiotic resistance comes from the human healthcare sector. Again, I don't want to name and shame, but this is why the holistic approach that we've been talking about, the One Health approach we've been talking about, I think it's for everyone to take their part of the responsibility. But by only reducing and targeting only the animal health sector will not bring the results that we are hoping for. That's all I want to say for now.
And Lara, let me come to you on this issue of breeding, which I think is very interesting, perhaps doesn't have enough focus, as Sarah has spoken about. You spoke about this multi-pronged approach that you had in Italy involving animal welfare. Was breeding part of this? What's your response to this?
Yes, first of all, I would like to stress out that in Europe, we do not use routinely antibiotics. We use it as a final part of a process in farming, in breeding, when necessary, under the mantra, as less as possible, as much as necessary, under strict control, and following exactly what the European rules said. And we have not forget that European standards are the higher in the world. And that's why I would not like to polarize the debate within sustainable or unsustainable model. I represent organic farming, free range, and mostly conventional. I would like to stress out that the debate should focus on sustainable or unsustainable business practices, because we can find really good farmer in conventional system and bad farmer in organic one. I think we have to try all together, not depending on the model, but depending on how we improve the standard in each model. Because if we look also at the farm to fork strategy in terms of wool sustainable aspect, any model has pros and cons. So we have to start with a wool comprehensive debate, science-based, not ideological, and try all together to create a spread of best practice within any model in order to achieve the goal that the farm to fork strategy is aiming to achieve. I think this is a really important point.
Thank you for that, Lara. Andrea, I'll turn to you now for your response to this. What's your reaction to the discussion we've had here so far?
Thank you, Natasha. Well, Lara knows how Italian consumers are picky on these issues, and so not by chance production system and farming in this area and the program she presented are quite advanced. Now, I start saying simply that we have, and I also pick up from Roxanne and Sarah. In my opinion, the lessons learned by this pandemic are very important. And one talk about how we have a delicate system that has to be resilient to important crises like this one. And the task of this system, this food system, is really to get shaped to be capable to deliver as much as possible food that act even as a prevention for in fact big other pandemics. AMR is a possible pandemic, and as a consequence, I think that what is done and ongoing on food and farming is really advanced in Europe, is really top, and we can only be pragmatic and pick up a lot of the models and the best practices that we speak about and what was mentioned, and see how far we could also transform this in this One Health, a real strong One Health situation. Because in fact, a lot is done also on the other side, the human side. But definitely we are in the need today to merge as much as we can these good practices and to respond with a very much synchronized system. And I pick up from what has been said also by Roxanne. It's quite funny, I repeat, and I conclude saying that one of the bridge between the two is welfare. Why? In my opinion, I'm in welfare since 20 years, and Roxanne knows very well. In fact, I'm there because it's a bridge where people that are caring about their health are caring about the eat and are caring about you care about the animals. And there is a chain there that is the bridge, in my opinion. And that could help to reinforce this concept of One Health, because it's the way we see as a unique animal, farmer, food, use of vaccine, and also as preventive, sure, but also of medicaments, because we need them too, it's true, as a unique global envelope that is called the One Health. But we don't have the instruments for all. That's good that now we talk.
Mm-hmm. And talking about kind of merging these competences and sharing of best practices, Erin, building on something I think you touched upon in your introductory remarks, the importance of kind of communication, training, which is something that Lara also brought up. From your experience, how best can we build these bridges for this One Health approach and to learn best from all the different sectors, all the best practices, and share them with farmers?
I think these days, better than ever, the technology allows us to enjoy whatever we want in terms of communication. We have seen that, of course, the fact that we have this meeting online and not person to person only just emphasize the new trend. So the sky is the limit in terms of what you can do in terms of raising awareness among different stakeholders or actors, if you want to say, taking advantage of technology, adapting or adjusting the messages to different level of education and to different needs, etc. So I definitely believe in raising awareness. From my perspective, raising awareness among veterinarians, among farmers, is definitely possible, but it requires time. It requires time, and it's almost never can come by itself. It's a standalone, because raising awareness need to be done also in a conducive environment. So if there are policies that are allowing the reduced use of antibiotics, etc., these the raising awareness actions will bring their fruits. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And Lara, we've heard about your experiences from Italy, and you were talking about that you wanted to kind of make this experience a blueprint for other sectors. You spoke about the pig sector. How best can we encourage kind of this knowledge sharing between sectors, in your opinion? And maybe you could elaborate a bit more on the kind of training aspect as well.
Yes, for example, in Italy, we arranged as association in the last year, and we do not stop it even in pandemic time, training course for farmers under the EU broiler directive. We arranged together with public authorities and experts training course on importance of animal welfare, in which we put a lot of attention on the AMR issue. We are trying to arrange the same kind of training also for pig farmers, because we think training, change of best practice, the importance as association to be a link, a contact point between expert public authorities and the producers, the farmers, is really, really, really important. And if we have been so successful in achieving this goal, it has been thanks to this continuous dialogue within all stakeholders. And I think this is really, really an important point, because we can drive the change having in mind that we have to involve and show that another way it is possible. And what I can say is that we never reared our animal as well as today, even if we look at the recent past. And for sure, there is room to improve. We have to do part of the solution of the AMR issue, because it's a really important public health issue. But we have to be aware also that the One Health approach is needed, because we can do our part as livestock sector, okay, and we will do it. But we have to involve also citizens, people as citizens in terms of awareness of prudent use of antibiotics in humans or in pets, for example. And also as consumers, explaining, for example, as we are trying to do in our communication program that we have under the umbrella of the EU promotion policy, that a consumer is part of the food safety chain from farm to fork. For example, with correct practices in kitchen in order to avoid cross-contamination, for example, to have the right behavior also in manipulating food. This is, I think, another really important point.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, I just wanted to come back to something that you actually already mentioned, this paper, I think from the Soil Association, that was talking about organic production and how it uses on average less antibiotics, and picking up on something Lara said about, you know, there are pros and cons of both organic and conventional. What I'm wondering is, what is the best way that we can help transfer knowledge of best practice between the organic and conventional livestock sector? You know, what can we learn from the organic sector in this respect? Obviously, as an organic farmer yourself, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this.
I would say it's, for me, it's a little bit simple, because I could say, why promoting a conventional system if it has much more risks and more antibiotic use, and also more use from pesticides and so on, other poison stuff, and has a lot of more density in animal farming than another system who is really could be the future for us, all of us. So I agree totally when there is the saying that there are good farmers on each side. But I don't speak about farmers, because it shouldn't, doing the right should be the simplest and the easiest way. And using less antibiotics in this conventional system is better than using a lot of antibiotics, but it's not good enough. We shouldn't use any antibiotics then when it's really, really important. And there is the veterinary medicine regulations will be applicable at January 2022, and it includes some good developments that important ways to reduce the use of antibiotics. So as you cannot authorize antibiotics to compensate poor hygiene or husbandry practices. So I think we know that the European citizens don't want this kind of animal farming. Why not changing it? It could be really a way to the future. And it could be good for our health and the health for the environment, and also for the health of ourselves. So I think for me it's really clear and it's obvious that this conventional agro systems went to a wall. Yes, all these problems we have comes also not alone, but also from these conventional agriculture systems, and also that the farmer, my neighbor, conventional farmer is my enemy, can't be. This is not the way we want to communicate and to want to live together. So, I mean, why don't use a system who is a win-win situation for everybody in the system?
Definitely breaking those branches between the two sectors. Roxanne, I will just come to you for a response on that. What's your reaction to that statement?
I'll be very quick because I know you want some time for Q&As, and I love Q&As. Maybe two things to remember. The first one is that no antibiotic is ever given without the approval and the prescription of a vet. So it's not a random use of antibiotics, just spraying them around. That's the first thing. And I'm difficult for me to accept that in the legislation that the management of how we will be using antibiotics in the future is not to, it's never written anywhere, to combat poor hygiene or husbandry practices. It is, we have some items in this legislation, and I'm just making sure I get the right ones here very quickly. We have this new legislation in order to ensure that we don't have we use them as growth promoters. This is kept, and that has been enforced for more than 10 years in Europe. We also have a ban on the prevented use of antibiotics in groups on animals. And there's also will be a ban on antimicrobials reserved for human use only. Those are the real scientific things that are behind the new VNP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. And just lastly, in the last 5 minutes, I want to zoom out here a little bit, because we've focused a lot on the EU, but this is, of course, a global issue. There needs to be a global perspective on this. So, Eran, let me just come to you quickly to kind of talk more about a global perspective. What I'm interested in is how the EU compares to the global use and trend that we see. We spoke about the fact that antibiotics for growth promotion is banned in the EU, but what's the kind of the situation in the rest of the world, and how can the EU work to encourage more global collaboration on antimicrobial resistance as such a global issue?
Well, thank you very much for this question, because the EU indeed is in some aspects years ahead of the rest of the world, even what we call high income countries, including North America, in terms of using antibiotics. And because of that, it can serve as a model for many countries. We often use the examples from EU countries like Denmark, Belgium, Netherlands, how indeed the use of antibiotic can be reduced. And this is in developing countries or middle income, low income countries. There are several issues that are crucial. It's beyond the fact that growth promoters are not allowed in the EU. For example, the fact that a farmer cannot go to the pharmacy and buy antibiotics as he wishes, just under a veterinary prescription. While it's true for many other developed countries, it's absolutely not the case in middle income or low income countries. And we have a lot of work to do there. But even there, when you think, oh, this is the first thing the countries need to do, this kind of policy, first is how to enforce the law. And second is, once again, if there is no good veterinary service to replace this need of going to the pharmacy without a prescription, you will never be able to do that, because farmers need to cure their animals. So this is one example. Another good example that, if I'm not wrong, in many countries in the EU is like this, is that veterinarians cannot make money by selling antibiotics. Unfortunately, even in high-income countries, particularly United States and Canada, and even the country that I'm coming from, Israel, veterinarians make a lot of money by selling antibiotics, and this is a huge challenge in many other countries to impose or to implement this kind of policies, because many developing countries try to take an example from developed countries, and when we are facing with this kind of practices, it's extremely difficult. Overall, again, to summarize, I think EU is an example, a very good example for our work globally, and we are looking for the EU also to guide us not only in terms of practices but also in terms of funding. EU is the main donor these days for FAO on antimicrobial resistance.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think that's given a great global perspective. And I just have one last question. I could keep talking about this for a lot longer, but I'm aware the clock is ticking. For you, Andrea, on the point of kind of this global perspective, I mean, I know the Farm to Fork strategy also looks outward. It highlights the role of the trade policy, for example, plays in the reduction of antimicrobials and encouraging other countries to kind of lower their use. I'm wondering for you, how important do you consider trade for kind of raising international standards when it comes to AMR, also for protecting European producers from imports? For a last comment from you, Andrea, on this point.
Well, thank you, Natasha. Definitely very important. The dimension of our bilateral talks and trade agreement are essential for this. Whatever is in the VMP anyway get into related to third country got into a feedback mechanism with our partners, and we have been in consultation to really increase the capacity to coordinate and cooperate. We have also success story already there, because specifically this language on the fight to AMR is coming into some of the current free trade talks and is also part of the current strategy for sustainable trade. The problem here is exactly the magnitude, in my opinion, and the ambitions we have. The EU, as was said by Aaron, is leading, is really setting a bar here that we see as essential, even to the survival of the system per se. That's why we need also, we can say, pedagogic capacity there, and to use the cooperation of the organizations that are together with us, like FAO and OIE and WHO, and also UNEP, and all the important organizations that we see as a player on that. That's why we insist on this international side, and we will keep on that, even with more insistence in the future.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and to all of you for this really interesting and very rich discussion. I will now turn over to my colleague Teresa, who's been taking questions from the audience and will put them to our panelists. So, Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natasha. We have a first question for Andrea from Paul-Henri Lava. Don't you think that front runners like Italian poultry sectors will be penalized with the Commission's target?
Well, I don't see this as a penalization. On the contrary, to be front runner, on the contrary, is to mark the way and to be supported, because the line has been also, probably Lara is more efficient than me on that, but the line taken is best practices and a good example for inspiring. So that's why not a penalization. On the contrary, to be really in front of marking an efficient food system.
Thank you very much. We have a second question, this time for Roxanne. Roxanne, the audience asks, do we have a clear picture of how much AMR is caused by the overuse of antibiotics in the livestock sector versus human?
If only I could share a graph with you that my colleagues always put in my presentation when we have PowerPoints. It is, I think, the most complex question to which I don't have an answer to, the transmission of AMR in animals to humans. It's so complex that I think even 1 hour from a specialist would be long enough to explain. But long story short, I really want the message to go through today that we, the animal health sector, and with our partners, I know, are there and committed to do and play our part in reducing any antimicrobial resistance in humans, and we'll do it until, you know, as much as possible. But to explain to you how much, I don't know, and I couldn't do it. But I wish I could show you this graph. It looks like a scribble, but it's very scientific.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. We have another question now for Iran from Bertha Stenberg. She asks, how do you see the role of the EU in comparison with other parts of the world regarding the veterinary use of antibiotics?
Well, again, I think the EU should be a model for many developing countries, as we used to call them, or middle-income countries, in many aspects in the legislation, but also in terms of practices. I think there's a good representation here for organic farms and farming in general. The advantage in Europe compared to other developed countries like in the United States, that you can see a lot of small farmers, much more than in the United States and Canada. And the reality of these small farmers can serve as a very good example for veterinary practices or farming practices around the world, particularly in middle-income countries. So this is something that both veterinarians and farmers can identify. This reality, the practices that they're using, can identify with and also learn from them. And that's from the practical perspective. But once again, I think the way veterinary medicine is practiced in the EU should be a model for many other countries. As an example, as I mentioned, the way veterinarians prescribe or are not allowed to sell antibiotics to farmers.
Thank you, Aaron. We have now a final question for Andrea. And a member of the audience asks, is there a view on the prioritization of reducing different types of antibiotics?
That's quite a sophisticated question, honestly. It's very technical. As you know, I cannot answer really directly like this without having the background, the scientific data that are provided to us and elaborated, as you know, by the European Food Safety Authority. But really no problem to provide this information further. It's a difficult question because it's very technical at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, so that finalizes our Q&A for today. I'll pass the word back to you, Natasha.
Thank you for those questions, Teresa. So as I said, it's been a very interesting discussion. We've touched upon a lot of different issues. I would be interested to hear from all of you your closing remarks and a bit of a reflection on maybe what we've spoken about today. So let me turn to each of you for your closing remarks, and I will start with you, Andrea.
Yes. Well, it was an opportunity to highlight, in an holistic approach, what are the priorities for the Commission. And I think that despite the COVID pandemic put in a shadow all our work on AMR that started already years ago, as everyone knows, we are really, even more than before, in the middle of a big challenge. And as a closing remark, I will underline that this platform also show how it's important to interact with different backgrounds and looking into all the learning lessons we had, because the challenge for the future is still very important. So that for me is a work in construction, and not only for the EU, and I would really be pleased to continue on the debate. Thank you.
It would be great to continue on the debate. We're unfortunately running out of time. Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you now, Sarah, for your closing remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all, the European Commission and also the other audience, that we have this possibility to do comments and to hear each other. I think we are well aware and we agree in a lot of things. So I will take a point that maybe I hear that we don't not agree, but I think what we need is to change the system in farming away from intensive systems to extensive ones that respect the natural needs of animals. And then we need to change the targets for breeding of animals. We cannot focus on performance alone, for example, meat or egg production, but need to consider health and resilience of animals. And using antibiotics in the way we are doing now means we only fix problems after the fact, and we continue with a sick farming system that has big negative impacts in the environment, animal health, and in the end, in our health. So we have a lot to do.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Let me now turn to Eren for your final remarks and your reflections.
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting FAO to this panel and to the panelists. It was a very interesting debate. Like many other before me, I will emphasize the importance of prevention and good farming practices to tackle the threat of AMR. Also raising awareness and good governance in terms of policies and law. But also, I think as a conclusion of this panel, I would say that FAO, together with many countries that we are supporting, looking at EU as a role model. And in terms of legislation, and also, as I explained, in terms of practices, including veterinary practices. So we are looking into more involvement of the EU, either in terms of providing the right practices, the right examples for countries, or in terms of assisting in funding. And in this opportunity, I want to thank the EU for the continuous support to FAO work in making this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eren. Roxanne, let me turn to you now for your final remarks.
Natasha, thank yous also to all those who spoke to, and I love this dialogue, so I hope we can continue that also offline. I would have 3 key words. The first one would be coexistence. We believe, again, in Animal Health Europe, and I'll repeat that all types of farming are due to exist. I mean, organic, conventional. What is important is if you have sustainable or unsustainable business practices, like Lara said. The second word, also co-word, would be cooperation, coexistent cooperation. I think it was clearly for us and what was said today, the livestock sector can't do it alone. AMR is a overarching issue. It's a global issue, and what we are doing as animal health is can't solve the problem. So cooperation. And the third one is coherence. And this, don't take it bad, Andrea, but maybe what I would be asking here under coherence is the holistic approach, but also maybe encourage the European Commission to do first an impact assessment also on all the targets, not only the farm to fork ones, but the Green Deal targets, to see if one doesn't contradict the other, because sometimes it can lead to that outcome. So 3 things: coexistent, cooperation, and coherence for me. Thank you.
It's a great summary. And over to you now, Lara, for your final remarks, please.
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank everybody for these interesting debates today. And how to finalize my speech. Pandemic showed us how important is food security, how important is self-sufficiency in the food chain. We need to provide food for all EU citizens, preferably EU food, because they want to eat EU food. To do this, we have to take into account that we have to balance the different topics of sustainability. I can say that maybe everybody would like to eat only organic food, But we have to make sure that also citizens with poor income can buy meat, because it is an important part of the diet. And can we, with a science-based approach, imagine a future with only extensive production? Maybe we will not have enough land. Maybe we'll be much more environmental impacting, because we will need more resource. So the challenges we have in front is to find really an equilibrium within all the assets of the sustainability within the farm to fork strategies. And that's what we ask the Commission. As EU poultry sector, we are ready to start with a strong, fair debate on how to proceed with the challenges we have in front. Also in terms of competition with third country, because we are front runner, we have the most elevated standard, but we have to take into consideration that this means much more cost. So we need a strong protection by EU in terms of trade, because it's not enough to say equivalent standard. We have to ask for identical standard. I think this is a really, really important point. And finally, I would come back to the importance to take into account the different starting point in approaching the AMR target of reduction of 50%. Because maybe in some sector or in some member states, such as Denmark or Sweden, there is no room to large reduction, because they are using really, really few quantity of antibiotics. Thank you very much to everybody.
Great. Well, that brings today's event to a close. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for this really dynamic discussion, and of course to all of you watching and that tuned in for this event. Just a quick reminder, you can also find this event on Euractiv's YouTube channel afterwards, and also to look out for an article on this theme which will be published shortly. So that's all from us. I'm Natasha Foote. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.